Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show. Company on Power Talk. Please go to our website, powertalk.live. Download our free app and stream all of our live local programming, including Solomon on Blast, the Jim Parisi Show, and yours truly, the Jake Feinberg Show. Can't thank you enough for making us part of your day today. And talked to a lot of musicians on this program and a lot of rhythm makers, and what's evolved over the last 6 years or so is that my show has become about rhythm. Rhythm is love, and I got a chance today to talk to a master rhythmist and a guy who's plays music. It's all music. Chris Parker, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you so much, Jake. Nice to be here.
It's great to hear you, man. This is just set one for us, but I just want to start out by playing one reason I actually got off my horse and found you on Facebook. I want to play you this. We have a game on this program called Name That Voice. I want you to listen to this, and then we'll come back and talk about it.
All right.
Those were the days when Bernard Purdy was recording, and Rick Marotta, Jimmy Johnson, Chris Parker, Alan Schwartzberg, Jimmy Madison, Jimmy Young, Bill Livornia, Ronnie Zito, and everybody was either doing jingles in the studio or record dates, and then after the dates were over, there'd be clubs where guys would go play live, or to just do their own thing, or where they would go and do a showcase for an artist that they did an album for. So they were great times. They were.
You recognize that voice?
Oh, sure.
That's Mr. Steve Gadd for the audience out there. That was from an interview I did from August of 2014. And, I kind of, so many questions in my head, but I wanted you to talk about, you grew up in Chicago, is that right?
No, I was born in Chicago, but I lived mostly in New York State, either the city or Yonkers, or finally moved to Woodstock in the late 60s, early 70s. I lived there for 4 years, and then I moved back to the city.
So tell me. Okay, so I was going to ask you about, essentially the idea of how you found, like in Chicago, for instance, Butter grew up in a very mixed neighborhood, but guys like Barry Goldberg and Bloomfield and those cats, like they had to go seek the black music. They heard it on the radio, and then they had to go across the tracks, and they had to go find their heroes, and they eventually did. And I'm just wondering about with you, how you found the ghetto music.
Well, I didn't grow up in Chicago.
I know that. No, I dig that. I mean, in New York, though, maybe.
Yeah, in New York, I made pilgrimages into the city to hear my heroes, up close, as soon as I was able. And the rest of the time I was listening to radio, AM radio. My dad was a huge jazz fan and had a lot of vinyl, and he had radio on the whole time he was working. He mostly worked at home. He is a painter, and he always had there was a station in New York at the time called WRVR with a disc jockey named Ed Beach.
Sure.
Who played a lot of jazz all day long. Plus, my dad had every Monk record ever recorded, every Miles record, every Count Basie record, Duke Ellington record, a lot of 78s as well as LPs. And I had total access to that. And once I cleared it with my mom, can I listen to music? Can I drum? And she would always say yes. So as soon as I was able, like 15, 16, I would take trips into the city and get into a place like the Village Gate, or sometimes the Village Vanguard, or Five Spot was still in existence then, but they wouldn't let me in. That was, Coltrane and Monk played there, but I couldn't get in there. That was too much of a scene on St. Mark's Place. But I did get to hear, Elvin up close and Jimmy Cobb up close and Tony Williams up close and Buddy Rich when he had his own club on 2nd Avenue and 68th Street, I think it was. I got to hear a lot of guys, 3 feet away, and then hung out with them afterwards to talk. And that's now it's amazing what you can find on the internet. YouTube videos of performances from the 50s and 60s, and kids and anybody studying music today has such unbelievable access. During 80s, late 70s, 80s, they started to make, instructional videos, Hudson Music, and those guys, Rob Wallace and Paul Siegel, have a whole series of instructional videos, and then those have all been transferred to DVD. That was a great resource for students that I had. If you couldn't see those guys live, you could at least watch their instructional video, But when I was growing up, you had to make a pilgrimage,
Yeah, no, and this is so important to talk about, because this is I interviewed Steve Swallow earlier this week, and he grew up in New Haven, and he played with T-Bone Walker, and the thing is that what's missing in jazz, I know you play all music, it's all music, but the thing about jazz at that time, and I want you to talk about this, is that the blues was right alongside the jazz. It was right there together, yeah. and it lent itself to this burning, visceral, authentic music. I listen to, again, I hate using labels, but you listen to jazz today, it sounds extremely classicalized. It sounds like there's a formula to it, and it's very polished. And we've been taught. I'm 39. My generation, younger generations have been taught to stare at facility instead of letting the body dance. And I just wanted you to talk about how the blues and the jazz were essentially right alongside each other when you were going to see cats like Elvin and Jimmy Cobb, and how it lent itself to incredible melodic music.
Yeah. What was on the radio and what was in my live performance was equally well represented. Jazz, blues, funk, folk. It was all out there, and there were a lot of different venues for people to play in. I would often hear, B.B. King or Muddy Waters or somebody at Cafe A Go-Go, and then hear Hendrix the next night, and then hear Blood, Sweat, and Tears. The Bitter End always had a wide variety of people, folk people, as well as, horn bands that were sort of coming in early 70s. But I totally agree. What did you just say? The jazz?
Well, I just wanted you,
instead of letting the body dance.
Yeah, let the body dance. As opposed to just, we've been taught to I don't know, man. Tower of Power. I just went to go hang with, got a chance to meet David Garibaldi in person. I've done about 3 or 4 interviews with him on the radio. But, it's like that music is just like funk. That's dance. Oh, yeah. That's dance music. And, they're playing at a place where it's just amazing to me that the music was really, when you were coming up, when your dad was spinning those 78s, it was, I wasn't around, but it was dance band music, and it wasn't stare and look at my facility kind of thing. Look at my dig my chops. It was a transcendent experience where the collective consciousness was actually that was really maybe the next question is, could you talk about the first experience you had in a band where you unintentionally you were raising the collective consciousness of the group, and in turn it was raising the collective consciousness of the audience, and then you were feeding off of that energy too. I mean, there was just a visceral feeling. Is there a point, was there a show early on in your career when you were just getting comfortable with your own sound, when you felt that amazing interaction between, ultimately raising the collective consciousness of the audience, which is what music is about?
Yeah. Oh, that happened very early for me. I was 11 years old. I had a gig backing up strippers in Brookfield, Connecticut, and it was tenor, drums, and organ. Sometimes it was just drums and tenor. But
this is
you're
awesome.
backing up a dancer, and later on there would be a guest vocalist. But the whole deal was to put her act over, and make her striptease and her exotic dancing get to the audience. And you had to have a solid beat and dynamics and be watching her the whole time to catch things, as she's abandoning garments. And that was a great experience musically as well as anatomically. And you knew if you weren't getting over, she would glare at you and say, "Come on, sweetie, come on, give it to me." And the audience would pick up on that too. Now they got something. Now they're cooking. She's really into it. The band is really into it. And buy me another drink. Let me have another drink. And the way I noticed early on is when you're really, really grooving hard and everything is locked in and you're on this, above the stage on some other plane where you're playing music, you're not thinking about the motor skills or anything else that's going on, but you see people with a drink in their hand and they can't get it to their mouth. They're grooving so hard that they can't get the liquid into their lips, That was always a good sign. And when people are tapping their feet and rocking back and forth in their seats and not being able to get the drink and say, "Yeah, another round. I'm going to hang here for a while." Those are always positive signs. And the owner of this place, Nino, was a tough guy, carried a gun and everything. And he would be always in the background. And if it didn't sound right or it wasn't grooving or something, he would give you a look that meant, he reminds me of the Joe Pesci, reminds me of him.
Absolutely. Goodfellas,
but
yeah.
He would give you... Mm-hmm. Yeah, he would give the band a look like, "You guys better get this together," and I mean now,
Yeah, no time. There was no intellectualizing of the music. It was, you really had to groove.
No. You are the entertainment. Yeah, you are the entertainment, and the entertainment sells drinks. And we got this place filled with cigarette smoke and alcohol and spilled beer, and that's the way I want it, and that's what brings in the money. Parking lot is full. This is a good sign. Keep it up. So we would do 4 or 5 sets. One of the singers was a woman named Claire Lane, who was Frankie Lane's sister. So we would always, the high point of the set was to do Ghost Riders in the Sky with her. I don't know if you remember that record.
Yeah, I dig.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So, I mean, again, you're talking like sometimes there's just tenor. You use the word dynamics. Like how the burlesque houses were prevalent everywhere. I mean, when I interviewed Ahmad Jamal, he was like, "How did you know I played those burlesque houses?" I said, I said after 1,000 interviews, I'm like, that was not only employment for you guys, but it was a place. It was a major place of employment, and on top of that. But he would say that, it was 8-hour gigs. Sometimes it would just be drums and piano, and they would switch instruments back and forth. And yet you were what you were really doing was you were just trying to get a woman to striptease. And yet, and so it wasn't like you were performing for an audience that was coming to see the band per se. You were actually...
No, I wasn't trying to get her to striptease. I was accompanying her. I was an accompanist to her act. She knew what she needed to do.
Right.
And the rate, the pace that she wanted to do it at. And you had to lock into that pace and not give away too much too soon. It had to be seductive, And it had to be, that's where the dynamics came in. You know, she would turn around and stomp her foot, you know, and you'd catch that with a bang on the floor tom or a cymbal choke, you know, to get people's attention. Listen, I'm up here trying to do this for you, and you better pay attention, you know. And she'd get a few more people looking directly at her, then she could work her magic, you know. She knew what she wanted to do. I was really, my role was accompanist, as was, you know, the other guys. And she or her and her partner were the ones, you know, controlling the pace of the evening. And they would do their thing and then get off. And then we'd play by ourselves for a while. And then they'd come back for a second show and a new outfit. I mean, it was really part of a team, you know, really being part of a team. Nobody was there to show, you know, I learned slam taps this week, or I learned.
Yeah, right.
You weren't there to show off your chops at all. It was to put her act over and to make the audience stick around and have more drinks, get really loaded if possible.
Absolutely. No, I mean, but I mean, this is like this wraps into like this idea of what Gadd was talking about in that opening clip, was that there was so many gigs to go around that, you know, there was a lot of people there, but it wasn't a lot of competition because there was a lot of gigs to go around. Everybody could do okay. And I look at it now and I say, well, we have very few clubs now, and a sort of like I said, a very more formulaic approach to music now, and somehow jazz has been, you know, gone from sort of a street music to like this more upper crust music. And I just look at my generation and younger, and I say, boy, you know, there's a lot of insecurity because there's less opportunity. You know, there's less opportunities to make a living doing what you were able to do. And I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about how that evolved. You saw that take place over time, you know. I mean, and I would like to get your opinion on how we got to a point where, you know, it's oh, you can pay to play, or you can play for the door. But, you know, all of us, somehow in our country specifically, it's like music now, you can't quantify music, so therefore it's just the musician's gift to the world, and it's not really a profession. And that's what I wanted you to talk about, if you agree with that.
Well, it's a huge subject. You know, my perception, there's a lot of mitigating factors. One thing was, you know, jukeboxes being phased out and DJs being phased in.
Absolutely.
Drum machines and synthesizers coming in, bigger amplifiers, bigger sound systems was part of it too. And the artists themselves, you know, record companies would take, say, like the Yardbirds. You know, the Yardbirds had, you know who that is?
Absolutely.
Yardbirds, you know, had Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, and Jimmy Page.
Right. Not very. So yeah. Go ahead.
So each one of those guys, you know, ended up having their own groups. But then each one of those groups, Cream and Jeff Beck and Led Zeppelin, you know, there would be splinter groups from that. The stuff got diluted because the record companies wanted to make the most out of every artist, and they would do a solo album from the guy, the lead singer of, I can't think of a good example, you know, but, well, Cream and Eric Clapton, Blind Faith, and, I mean, that was Stevie Winwood, that was a successful version of it, you know, but companies kept doing that and taking a single guy from a group that had a hit, you know, and then have him do an album and stuff like that. Pretty soon, the record-buying public got hip, you know. There's only going to be one good song on this, and maybe two good songs on this LP. Why should I pay for this whole LP?
Wow.
And it really, that got overwhelmingly prevalent in the 70s and 80s with disco, and people would try to make a disco version of this and a disco version of that, and then they didn't really need drummers. They'll just have a drum machine do it. and then it was easier for a DJ to duplicate that, for dancers, and it stopped being about individual performances and really got into making a buck out of the records, and then CDs in '82, I think, was the debut of CDs. That the format itself became more important, CDs, and now that's a 25, 30-year-old format. And why should I buy this whole CD for $15 when it only has one good song on it? I'll just download it, and now it's beyond that. Streaming, I'll just get whatever I want on Spotify or Pandora. And there are still good songs and good artists doing good songs, but they're really, to me anyway, far and few between. There's a lot of stuff that if it sounds good, because it sounds like a Sly Stone record, or it sounds like an early Tower of Power, or it sounds like Led Zeppelin, or it sounds like something from the 60s or 70s where people were really making music, organic musicians in a room together making music. It wasn't formulaic, it wasn't Pro Tools enhanced, it wasn't fixed up by Melodyne and everything harmonized and the vocals fixed up and everything. That stuff, I can hear it a mile away, where everything is perfectly in tune, perfectly synced with the click. There's a lot of different factors, The fact that there's always a younger generation coming up who's anxious to perform and anxious to play kind of dilutes the bass too. We never had guys who, until, now, you're a vintage guy, or you're a legendary guy, or you're a seasoned veteran, or because there's so many kids who are so amazingly talented and great players and stuff like that. They have the benefit of YouTube and videos and Berkeley educations and
I would just say I don't know. I mean, you didn't learn music in academia, and I don't. Go ahead.
I played trumpet all through school. I had a great music teacher, and I was playing drums on the side, just picking it up off the radio and stuff. I never studied drums or percussion in school. That I learned by myself, but I did play trumpet and then euphonium, and then I studied piano. I always played bass, just wanting to play it. And drums was always by ear, until I got back to New York in the 70s, and then it was really necessary to learn to read drum music and to really learn about the rudiments and learn about technique and all that stuff. But I had made it that far without it.
Can you just talk about, like, I mean, when I listen to, Lee Von Helm, there's so many people I couldn't even begin to, but there from your generation, so much unique sound, so many self-taught drummers or taught by ear. Can you talk about something that you learned, a technique that you still implement today, or that you learned just organically through your own love of rhythm? I just find it that my thing about YouTube today is that we're saturated with material. So people don't necessarily always know what is really quality stuff. And on the flip side with Pro Tools, you can have a singer and she says, "How did I sound?" The engineer said, "Oh, terrible. Come up, we'll fix it." So you don't even have like, really, I think what I'm getting at is authenticity. If people start to,
Right.
if they don't even know, if they can't even detect the authentic, true music, then that's a serious problem for our society as well. I think there's a direct correlation between where we're at in our society and where we are at in our music. Sort of,
I agree.
So yeah. Was there something that you just sort of learned that is the Chris Parker, organic cutting floor kind of thing on the kit, that you just learned on your own?
Well, the guys I emulated, the records that really moved me, were Count Basie and Duke Ellington records and Leadbelly, John Lee Hooker, Joe Williams singing with the Count Basie band, Big Joe Turner. There were these crossover kind of records. They were singing blues, but it had a beat to it and was getting airplay. There was another guy named Big Miller, Jimmy Reed. There were country guys, there were blues guys, and anything that caught my ear was because it had all these elements going. It had a great beat, it had a vocal that you could believe in, that was emotional, whether it was Hank Williams or Joe Williams or Joe Turner or Jelly Roll Morton or Professor Longhair. Something would catch my ear, and then I would go deeper into it. With Count Basie, it was Joe Jones, that rhythm section, Walter Page and Joe Jones. Just every track, whether it was Jumping at the Woodside or 1 O'Clock Jump or those tracks, I said that's got me, and made me want to dance, made me want to sit at the drums and learn what he was doing. There's a great live at Newport concert of Duke Ellington where Joe Jones is standing at the edge of the stage, kind of helping hold the band together, and Paul Gonsalves does something like 48 choruses on a tune that's called Diminuendo in Blue and Crescendo in Blue. It's a blues. They just keep playing the blues. And I think it's Sam Woodyard on drums in the Duke Ellington band, but Joe Jones is at the edge of the stage. And I think that was a huge influence on that particular performance. But the stuff, it just never lets up. Never lets up. The groove is so hard. And there's a lot of Duke Ellington records like that, where the unit, the Duke Ellington band, and all those personalities, it was one big team of guys, and he knew how to write for each individual. This is a showcase for Paul Gonsalves. This is a showcase for Harry Carney. This is a showcase for somebody else in the band, and he would write around their strengths. Same thing with Count Basie. He knew which guys were going to give him a certain kind of performance and how to arrange and play those things to spotlight those guys, Woody Herman, same thing. The big bands at the time really caught my ear, and blues stuff really caught my ear, because it was so heartfelt, soulful,
authentic.
Authentic,
Yeah, I mean,
authentic. The authenticity. And I fell in love with Aretha, with Roger Hawkins, and Ray Charles. With Bruno Carr. He's got a live at Newport record too. But the first time I heard Ray Charles, just something in that delivery, made me believe it. Whatever he's singing about. James Brown, same thing. And that was always the key to me to lock into the authenticity of the whole record, not just the vocal, but the rhythm section too. Everybody was in the room together. Everybody felt it. Everybody had a good take. Somebody screwed up here. There's a little mistake there, but it doesn't matter. The performance as a whole, it might speed up a little bit, or it might.
You're nailing it, because it's I mean, we've gotten so. You make things so perfect, and you take all the soul out of it, and but this is I'm doing I'm producing a documentary on Stan Getz, and I wanted
cool.
I wanted to ask you about this. I know you came along a little bit later, but there is this nexus between genius and addiction. And I wanted you to talk about if you were at all aware, because you were living on those Monk records and these titans of the music. Yet there was a side to the jazz life. I just was hoping you could talk about what your concept of that original jazz life was, the life that your dad loved to listen to on the records, and if you were exposed to whatever that life is and was?
Well, there was a mystique, around some of these guys. I was named after Charlie Parker, my father's
Oh, wow.
sense of humor, and Charlie Parker's real name is Charles Christopher Parker. So Christopher Parker was me, and my father told me that I was born singing Yardbird Suite, which is, I don't know, I was always aware of the mystique surrounding the jazz musicians and heroin and guys with problems and all that stuff. But there were as many guys who played their asses off just as much as the guys with problems, like Dizzy Gillespie and Harold Garner. There were plenty of guys who had a sober life and had the same qualifications, To me, when you're sick either from self-ingested drugs or whatever, or if you have pneumonia. Like I remember this from coming back from New Orleans one time, and I went right to the club playing with Steve and Richard T. and Cornell and Eric and Gordon. I was really, really sick. I had shared a room with a guy who had pneumonia, and I got pneumonia, and I felt like I just wanted to be in bed. But I played because I had the gig and I didn't want to miss the gig. And that was a night where I was just playing by instinct. I wasn't thinking about anything. All I wanted to do was get through the gig and play the right notes and go home. And that was a night that everyone said, "Man, you're playing your ass off." "Oh my God, I never heard you play so good." Whoa. And that's happened subsequently a bunch of times, where you're so sick, you're not thinking about technique, you're not thinking about performance, you're not thinking about somebody in the audience or what's going to happen after the gig or your next gig, or all you're doing is concentrating on surviving.
Right, I dig, man. I dig it, man. Oh God, I dig. I love it. And that's when your true nature completely comes out at that point. I mean,
right.
Wow, that's mind-blowing. So you were in New Orleans when that went down, you said?
I was doing a record with Alan Toussaint, an artist named Randall Bramlett. Alan Toussaint was the pianist, and we recorded at his studio, which was great, and he was an unbelievable guy to work with. But the guy I shared a room with at the Howard Johnson was really, really sick. And by the time I got back to New York, I said, "Man, I never felt like this before." They wanted to put me in the hospital, and I said, "There's no way I'm going to the hospital. I got a gig tonight. I got a gig."
Right.
I didn't want to miss the gig. So I did it, but I felt, like death. I felt like death. And I couldn't believe all these great compliments I was getting. Man, that's
You're like, I just want to crawl into bed. I want to go to bed right now. I
want to go to bed.
I have to ask you, man.
So
I mean, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, I mean, you. Were you one of the pioneers of going to Woodstock? I mean, I am. We could spend hours just talking about. I mean, I've interviewed Alan Toussaint, so you went to see Saint Studios, but I'm talking like, I mean, why did you decide to move there, and were you like one of the first cats to move up there? Because ultimately, I mean, I'm transcribing all these interviews that I've done from. I mean, whether it's John Simon or whether it's, Jeff so many guys that you've been playing, Moldauer and Maria Moldauer, Jeff Moldauer, and I've interviewed all these cats, and you were up in stock at that. Were you one of the original cats up there?
I moved there the winter, late fall, early winter after the festival, which was 69. I was there early. I think I was there at the end of 69, but definitely 1970. Levon and Rick Danko and Richard Manuel and Garth, they were all there. And I was there early. I think I was there at the end of 69, but definitely 1970. No, Levon and Rick Danko and Richard Manuel and Garth, they were all there. And Richard Manuel and Garth, they were all there. And Levon and Rick Danko and Richard Manuel and Garth, they were all there. And Levon and Rick Danko and Richard Manuel and Garth, they were all there. And Levon and Rick Danko and Richard Manuel and Garth, they were all there. And Levon and Rick Danko and Richard Manuel and Garth, they were all there. And Levon and Rick Danko and Richard Manuel and Garth, they were all there. And Levon and Rick Danko and Richard Manuel and Garth, they were all there. And Levon and Rick Danko and Richard Manuel and Garth, they were all there. And Levon and Rick Danko and Richard Manuel and Garth, they were all there. And Levon and Rick Danko and Richard Manuel and Garth, they were all there I don't think Robbie Robertson lived there, but all the band guys lived there, and Jeff Muldaur and Paul Butterfield, and a couple of English guys, some guys called Foghat, and a guy named Jackie Lomax, who was really cool.
Absolutely, dude. Oh my God, this is insane. And then that's what I was talking to. Buzzy Featon was up there, or he was
Buzzy Featon, sure.
Love that cat, and but there would be these like insane jam sessions with like Yuma Sultan and Buzz. I know that you were fully involved. What was that? I mean, what was your gig? Were you going into the city for a few days to do studio and then come back for the weekends and just play at the Joyous Lake, or what was the life? What was the Chris Parker like gigs lifestyle that you had up there?
Well, I was going to the School of Visual Arts in New York City. I was trying to be a painter, and I was playing gigs on the weekend with like wedding bands and casual gigs, with organ-based tenor vocalists and stuff, just playing kind of top 40 tunes and some jazz gigs. But I really there were a bunch of different records that made me think, what, this is what I really want to do. And the painting thing, I was alone in this apartment all day long, basically talking to myself. What do you think about the blue? Well, I think the blue could be a little richer here. And I was, that's what I wanted to be, a fine artist. But I had always played music. So I answered an ad in Rolling Stone for a drummer wanted in Woodstock. And it was a band called Holy Moses, which was like a rock band, straight eighth notes. And but that's when I moved to Woodstock to audition for that band. And then once I was there playing with them, I experienced all this other stuff. Butterfield's band with Buzzy Featon and Sanborn, and I think Neil Larson was in it. There were a bunch of guys. That was a big, blues band with horns. Pig Boy Crabshaw was the album, or In My Own Dream was the album.
Right.
And all those guys, Ralph Wash was the guitar player, and then Buzzy Featon. They all lived in Woodstock. Plus the guys from the band, plus people like Tim Hardin, who were kind of left over from the festival, and were managed by Albert Grossman. Bob Dylan lived there. There was a whole scene, some of it folk, some of it rock. But I think Jack DeJohnette has lived there a long time, not specifically in the town of Woodstock, but outside.
Absolutely correct. Absolutely. No, I mean, even even Purdy, and I think Purdy and Chuck Rainey had places up there for a while. I mean, it was an escape place for a lot of cats, but the amount of music, I mean, music from Big Pink, I mean, the Brown album, I mean, you were like, so this Holy Moses record, it was just straight ahead rock music. I mean, were there any cats in there? And was it? How long did that band stay together? And who was in that band?
Only stayed together about 2 years, I guess. We made one record on RCA. It was a singer-songwriter named Billy Batson who passed away maybe 6 months ago. He was a songwriter, and there were two guitarists from the Baltimore area, Dave Vidic and Ted Spelios. I think Ted Spelios is still alive.
Wow.
Dave Vidic passed away. Marty David was the bass player. He passed away. And it was, bass drums, two guitars, and Billy played tack piano, kind of. It was like the band, but with... I said to somebody else, more firepower, because the guitar players, played Les Paul and Stratocaster, and it was louder and more raucous. Nobody was playing mandolin, and nobody was, it was more straight ahead than the band.
Right.
But that was definitely an influence. We were alongside Hendrix. There were Hendrix influences, and we recorded at Electric Ladyland because we had the same manager as Jimi Hendrix had, this guy Michael Jeffrey. So we were his new venture. You know, after Hendrix was launched, he was going to have a band. We recorded Electric Lady, and then Jimmy passed away. And that kind of put a pall on the whole thing. We did one tour where we opened for a movie about Jimi Hendrix, which was really odd. It was us, Richie Havens, and this movie about Jimi Hendrix.
Wow.
Very odd.
Wow, that is odd. That is so freaking cool.
Yeah.
You know, I just want to say that for the record, I mean, I mean, talking to Chris Parker here on the Jake Feinberg Show, I mean, it took me a minute. I mean, I have now, my favorite band of that time period was the Fabulous Rhinestones.
Oh, yeah, that's my brother, Eric.
Okay, so, dude, you have no idea. Okay, so that's your brother, Eric, right? I mean, I have had such a struggle looking at that album because I thought that it says Chris Parker on in the liner note. I only listen to vinyl, but you're telling me that's your brother.
Eric Parker, yeah.
Okay, well, I was connected to, boy, this is tripped out. So.
Well, the original band,
Yeah.
Fabulous Rhinestones, Harvey Brooks, and I think the drummer was a guy named Greg Thomas.
Yes,
But he went back to California.
Yes, Greg Thomas.
And then my
yes,
brother
yes.
Eric. Then my brother Eric took over, and he was in the band with, you know, Harvey and Cal David and Marty Greb.
Such a sweet. Okay, so
that's
that
the
wasn't
whole
you.
band.
That wasn't. But that wasn't. So did you meet? When did you meet Harvey Brooks though? Did you meet him at the Cafe A Go Go, or how many? Like, I guess that's what I'm saying. Like, you knew, you must have known some of these cats before you wound up moving to Woodstock.
I think I'd maybe done a jingle or something with Harvey Brooks. I'm trying to remember when I met him. It might maybe not until Woodstock. You know, I had a jam session or something.
Right.
But I knew of him from the Bitches Brew album. You know, he was a luminary to me, Harvey Brooks. Oh my God! Plus, he had played on Dylan records and on Al Cooper Super Session records. You know, he was a hot New York studio guy. I don't think I met him in New York. I think I met him in Woodstock, and at a jam session or something. You know, and we eventually did some gigs together with an organist from San Francisco named Merle Saunders.
I cannot believe that you. Oh, hold on, because I wanted to ask you about this because there was this really interesting period of time at Woodstock where Butter was going through a change in his band. Moldauer was up there, and I think Merle and John Kahn came out there. And
right, that was the first band.
You know, my show is dedicated. So you and John Kahn got a chance to. Please tell me about. Please break down this. This is absolutely essential for my own peace of mind.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, I was still doing Holy Moses. We had done a bunch of gigs. The record came out, and I was in Woodstock, but the band was falling apart. And I got a call from Butterfield, which I thought was a joke. Somebody said, "This is Paul Butterfield." I said, "Yeah, right."
Yeah, right.
But he said he wants to put something new together. Would you want to do some playing? I said, "Sure." And he had heard me in all these different contexts around Woodstock, with a blues band, with a jazz band, with a funk band, with a gospel band. And I kept seeing this guy in the background with a full beard and a funny hat and stuff, who was always kind of in the audience lurking. And I never put it together that, you know, because I know Paul Butterfield with a shock of dark hair and a clean-shaven face and a microphone and a harmonica in front of his face.
Sure.
So I never realized it was him. And he had this funny, like, Eskimo fur hat that he would wear, you know. So I just thought, that's the funny guy with the fur hat is here again. Anyway, he called me and said, "You want to do some playing?" I said, "Sure." And it was me, John Kahn, Merle Saunders, Amos Garrett, and Jeff Moldar. And we ran through some tunes at Jeff Moldar's house, and everything just gelled. That was a really cool band. And then we did a movie soundtrack, a movie called Steelyard Blues. We all went out to San Francisco.
Yeah, Nick Gravenitis and Merle Saunders. It's one of my favorite soundtracks of all time.
And Bloomfield is on there, and Nick Gravenitis. and Merle and me and John Kahn. Jane Fonda came by the studio one day. So that really helped the band evolve. Then we started doing some gigs that summer. And then John and Merle were both hooked into this San Francisco scene with Jerry Garcia, Old and in the Way.
They were also doing Legion of Mary with Ron Tutt and people like,
right.
Oh my God! So they were being
right.
pulled. Were they being pulled back? Is that I've always been trying to figure out why that band. So, but I mean, just in general, you did play some gigs with that group.
We did the whole summer and into the fall with that group, yeah, and that movie soundtrack, and then they, there were no more tour dates coming up, so they wanted to go back to San Francisco, and then Paul started looking for guys to replace that, and he found Billy Rich, who plays with Taj Mahal to this day,
absolutely, and
this guy from New Orleans, Ronnie Barron, on keyboards, and that was the new band. That's the band that's on the record, the first Better Days record and the second Better Days record. So you I mean what that is phenomenal. So at that point, that's when you recorded with Butter in '73 or so. I mean is that right? Right. Yeah.
And then because I think Big Black played on that album. The Conguero. You know that cat Big Black?
Yeah, he's not on the Better Days records. I think Bobby Hall Porter is on the second record, playing congas.
Yeah, I've interviewed. If you can believe it, I've interviewed all of those cats. Bobby Hall.
Really?
Dude, I got to send you all these interviews, Chris. You're going to lose your mind, man. Like, I mean, this is like a long time coming, but like. I've gone and, hung with Big Black and interviewed Bobby Hall. And
cool.
I mean, and to me, it's like, absolutely, these were like, it was like baseball cards, man. And that was what your view, when you first started to listen to those records and then turn around the back of the liner notes, what was your view of the accompanists? To me, what you were talking about before with Duke Ellington was essential. He would set up shows that would be geared towards Gonzalez or somebody else. He'd be showcasing other people in the band, and then they eventually maybe would get out and become leaders on their own. So what was your concept of an accompanist when you were coming up? Because nowadays, like you talked about, with the splintering and the way the record industry goes now, it's like one major person in the front and everybody else in the back, and those people are irrelevant. It's just about this one person. As opposed to before, right. The dynamic was clearly about the accompanist. I just wanted you to riff on that.
Yeah, my take on it was to put over the soloist. If the soloist was a member of the band, when he stepped out, you back him up. Or if there was a vocalist, you put him or her over. The drums was always to serve the song. You were laying down the time to give everyone else the foundation so that we could put this song over, the concept of the song, and you would try to give that song and that performance an arc, a beginning, a middle, and an end, so that there was a story being told, so it was a musical event, not just a recreation of a recorded performance, but an actual event. So, I mean, I heard that in the big bands, the band comes down a little bit so that Frank West with Count Basie take a solo. Somebody, Count Basie himself take a piano chorus. The band was, and the recording of those days was limited, just one mic, and everybody's got to balance their dynamics, balance their volume so that the recording is good. It really made everybody very sensitive, without gobos and without isolation and stuff like that. You really had to be attuned to the overall volume of the band and the dynamics, and to everybody being a participant in creating this landscape. It's the analogy is really the painting to me. You know, a good painting has got a foreground and midground and something on the horizon, something you see peripherally, something you see in the distance, something you see, you know, up close and in focus. I think it's a very solid analogy. You know, a good song, a good performance is like a good painting. So my concept as an accompanist was always, you know, as part of the team, and my job on the team was to put this song over, you know, put the vocalist over, back up the soloist when he or she took a solo, and keep the rhythm locked in, you know, so that everybody had a solid foundation to play over. And I think every musician who's thinking and playing from the heart, you know, tries to do the same thing.
You know, it's very important, playing from the heart. I did 2 interviews with Rick Marotta, and he said that in today's times he'll be hearing something. He won't be able to see the drummer, but he's hearing something, and he's like, that has to be machine parts, you know. And he goes out, and it's actually a human being playing machine parts. And it's
right.
like, I mean, what was your reaction when in general, it doesn't seem to make any sense. Cost saving, I understand, but the idea that, like, you get to a point now where you needed to have a drum machine because human beings couldn't really keep time. I mean, what was that like when that came in? I mean, it obviously didn't affect your career per se, but how did it affect music in general? I mean, because you take it. I mean, the rhythms. I don't care if it's Tony Brown-Nagel or, you know, if it's Zigaboo Modaliste or you or Garibaldi. It's like, it doesn't come from your, you know, your shoulders and your arms. It comes from your heart, you know. And I just
right.
I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about, or even more to the point, for younger people that are trying to almost, you know, drop off the map and get away from the saturation of material and all the books and all this stuff. Like, what would be your advice to people who are just trying to create original rhythms on their drum kit, but yet they're surrounded by just a huge amount of digital and machine-based rhythm in this time? Well,
I'm kind of all over the place on that. I mean, my grandfather on my mother's side was an organist, you know, a standalone organist who traveled on riverboats from Chicago down to New Orleans and back and forth. And I was fascinated when he came to visit because he had a little rhythm ace as part of his B3 setup. And I just played with it endlessly. I thought this was so cool. You know, and they were primitive beats, a primitive cha-cha, a primitive samba, primitive little 2-beat country beat stuff, and the sounds were really crappy. But the idea of a machine keeping time for you, I thought was kind of cool. You know, I was intrigued. So I always had some kind of a drum machine, you know, when they were primitive, to practice with, to put it on. Here's a thing, this weird beat. Let me play against this, you know, and then speed it up a little. Play against that at that tempo, then slow it down and play against it. That was a way to practice for hours and hours and hours, you know, just let that thing go. It got more and more sophisticated, and as they tried to emulate more authentic drum sounds, people got really carried away, and there was a whole flock of drum programmers who came in, you know, guys who maybe once played drums but were really good with machines, with a Lindrum or with SP12, or, you know, were just good programmers. They could do something. But even the best programmer, you hit the button and it starts, and that's it. It goes in a straight line in metronomic time from beginning to end, you know, and that defeats the whole purpose.
Exactly.
To me, defeats the whole purpose of putting the song over and telling a story and having a beginning, middle, and end, and an epilogue, and a denouement when everything, you know, finally becomes clear. I mean, like a good novel. But there's interesting things you can do, within the context of a good song. It might be cool to have a little loop going or something. I just did a record with a woman named Kate Schutt, Schutt. It's going to be a really good record. And the pre-production had all these loops going on. It was kind of fun to play against them. I ultimately ignored them and played with her and her guitar playing. Her guitar playing dictated the time more than the loop did. But it was an interesting place to start. What I would say today, is your heartbeat is where the original drums came from. Some caveman with a hollowed out log or two rocks trying to signal another caveman, hey, I got a bison over here. You're not going to believe it. We're going to have chops tonight. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I love it. Yeah,
You're
the
not
most
gonna believe
primitive.
it,
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah. I got a mastodon. You're going to feast. You're going to feast this month. But there was a reason to play that beat. There was a reason to communicate that beat, and no matter what it sounded like, it was important because it was saying to somebody, there's food available. We're going to dance tonight. My wife is pregnant. This is great news. I mean, there were reasons to make this music, and the drums are at the heart of it. There's a reason to be dancing, and we need this beat so that we can all dance. And to me, the mechanization was in the 70s and stuff, disco, because the dance style changed. They wanted to do stuff that was more like ballroom dancing, which was swing time or two beat, in the 30s and 40s. It was almost a return to that, four on the floor, bass drum steady, in that way that any dancer could get out there and know where he or she was within the music, because every quarter note was covered. The hip hop stuff I hear today, there's some very interesting beats, and since they're not worried, or they're not that they're not worried, but they're not concerned with verse chorus structure or symmetrical verse and symmetrical chorus, they can stretch bars, make it a 11-bar phrase, or make it a 2-bar hook with three extra eighth notes or something. I've heard some really wacky stuff, but it doesn't matter because nobody is really singing. It's just they're reciting this poetry, street poetry from the Bronx that goes with this certain beat, and they're less concerned with anybody be able to dance, as long as somebody can sort of hump to it,
right,
or make out to it. There's not that's unfair to say. There's breakdancing. There's some really slick breakdancing and stuff I've seen, that goes with a definite beat. But a lot of the stuff that I'm hearing today is falls into those categories. Here, this is a make-out beat. This is for you and your wife, or you and your girlfriend to sit on the couch and make out by. Here's a beat that you screw by, that you hump by. Here's a beat that personifies you chasing the girl down, trying to find this girl. Here's a beat that's filled with braggadocio, to show that you're virile, and able to.
And are those beats? Most of them are electronically based. I mean, they're computer based, right?
Right.
I mean, they're not necessarily being even played
or
by
sampled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Or they sampled something. Yeah.
How did you just speaking of you, this female artist that you cut this album with, how did you ignore the loop and focus on her time?
Once I listened to it for a while, okay, this is like a shaker kind of thing, or it's got a little, most of them were 2-bar loops, and it's got a little pattern or something. Okay, that's cool. Now turn it down in the mixer. Stop listening to it, I got where the time is. I kept it very low in the mix so I can hear it as a reference point, but turned her up in the mix. Turned her acoustic guitar and her vocal up.
So it was an overdub. You guys weren't doing it live in the studio.
No. This is all live.
Oh, it was all live.
Bass, piano, drums, and herself. Yeah. That was all live.
Wow.
They had her producer and arranger, my friend Rob Mounsey, had made reference loops and structures. He had the stuff written out, her arrangements written out, but it was really important to hear her singing and to hear her what she was going to do on acoustic guitar. Nylon string, I think in most cases nylon string. So I listened to the loops and got the idea. Okay, that's kind of a 16th note bass. Could be a shaker or this pattern with a couple of different sounds with an accent on 3. That was like a taking off point for what I would play. And sometimes it had, referred to that, and sometimes it didn't at all.
Have you ever been to the motherland of Africa?
No.
So I'm just wondering about your experience as it relates to why, in your mind, you believe that, if you do believe that, why our country has never fully embraced our only true art form of jazz, and while it's consumed in Europe and Japan, but it's why at one time it was the popular music of our country when you were coming of age and growing up, but
what? Say that again.
Well, I mean,
what was the popular?
At one time, improvisational melodic improvisation was definitely the popular music of the day. But as we've moved on here, it's like, why has this country never accepted this art form?
That's a very good question.
That's a good answer.
I think there's more acceptance now than there has been in a long time. For a long time it was locked into racism and segregation, and I mean, God, Duke Ellington and Count Basie and Ray Charles, those guys had a horrible time, playing in the South, whites only, and coloreds can't eat here. God, all kinds of horrible stuff.
Yeah.
Horrible things, that they had to put up with.
In some ways, I would argue that even though it was overt racism, and it drove them forward. Now it's more covert. But continue. I go ahead. Go ahead.
It's true. It's country is embraced,
right.
And maybe it's as simple as that's the heritage of a certain portion of America. Immigrants from Ireland and Italy and Spain and Germany, played stringed instruments or played wind-blown instruments, and they hear the downbeats on 1 and 3, and they hear a certain triadic progressions related to European classical music. They don't hear, or they weren't exposed to, blues, 12-bar or 16-bar blues. That was music of people from the other side of the tracks. That was music of people who we don't mix with those people. The church played a certain kind of music, that hymnals and stuff like that. That's almost where it comes closest to being integrated.
That's right. That's right.
Various churches. So, and
I mean,
of
it just.
now,
I mean, I
like
just
you
went
were
to
saying
the.
before.
I just went to the. I was in New York, and I went to the Jazz Standard to see my dear friend Pat Martino play, and it's like I'm looking
Oh
around,
yeah.
and it's like, what the heck, man? Like, how did it get to this point where it's like so? And music is. I mean, it's amazing, but you know the it's come out, get your drink order, get your food order, get the plates, get the check, wrap up the set. I mean, it's like it's become like this upper crust kind of vibe, and it's like this is not. I don't know. It doesn't feel right. It feels like it's the clientele. Whatever Art Blakey used to say, my job is to wash away the dust of everyday life for those people that come in to see me play, and so there's like there's a lot of different factors. Some people would. Ramsey Lewis said that the music people kind of got lost in that that more fusion. When I hate that word, but when things started to get a little bit more complex, people stopped being able to tap their foot to it, so the audience got lost, or people would leave the head of the tune, and it's just to me we're at I don't know if it's a crossroads or if we're past the point, but I'm just not sure how to increase vocabulary of music without consistent, and I'm talking about like weeks at a time, being on the road in some upholstered sewer playing for a month at a time, and just developing your own individual sound. And I'm trying to figure out how we can possibly not even get back to that, but just to get to that point where we allow people to create their own individual sound. Because actually today I listen to modern music and I can't tell who's playing.
Right. Well, it's wide open, for songwriters, singers, and players. There's so many people out there, and the world is all connected now with the internet. You can hear all kinds of music from all over the world at the click of a mouse.
That's right.
Almost. So it's uncontrollable. I think it's inevitable. There's an inevitable march of time and technology and stuff that's. I mean, it's hard to tell what's a novelty right now or what's the beginning of a new kind of development. Like, have you listened to this guy Jacob Collier?
I know the name, but no, I haven't listened to it.
Well, he's a kid, with a basically he's on stage with a whole studio, drum machines and synthesizers and tape delays and loops and stuff like that, and he starts out with an idea and develops it as you stand there, and he's very good at it, and it's interesting that what he gets happening, but what does that mean? That he has all this equipment and all these machines that will follow his direction, and he's listening as he goes along and singing and improvising on what the machine is doing. It's kind of cool. I don't know.
I dig. No,
I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. But I want to. You just nailed before we wrap up set one here. I wanted to ask you, if you could talk about, because to me, what I've become obsessed with is the idea of the musical conversation. Today, even just in general, people get up and they'll I'm sure you've had the experience, people just wanking it on the bandstand. They're playing 20-minute solos. They're not really listening to anybody per se. And I go back to this time, Paul Motion, Steve Swallow, Scotty LaFaro, that conversational music, even though it was in a trio form. I just want Chris Parker's definition or understanding of the importance of the musical conversation. You just talked about this cat, Collier, up there with machines, and he's creating a groove, and he's creating a But it's at his beck and command, and he's a solo. He's the captain of the ship, and there's no other human beings. So in the case of the musical conversation of those cats from that early '60s period, I just wanted you to talk about your concept of the musical conversation and how vital that is to the live musical performance.
Well, again, my concept relates to painting, which is something else that I do, and I want it to be representational. I want it to have a foreground and something on the horizon and something in the periphery. I want it to tell a story. I want it to have an arc. Conversation has to be articulate and yet has to be something that everybody is interested in talking about. So a lot of times you can make small talk with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
You're having a conversation, but what does it really mean? I like it much more when you have a conversation with somebody and somebody's got an opinion and somebody else's opinion differs from that. And then as you discuss, maybe you're trying to convince this other person of your opinion, or he's trying to convince you of his opinion. And the ensuing dialogue, hopefully a dialogue, not a monologue, is a give and take, and has got crescendos and decrescendos. It's got all kinds of nuances. And I think the musical conversation, like with my trio, piano, bass, and drums, we're talking to each other about rhythm, about harmony, about theory, about statements, about exclamations, about humor.
Humor,
and just like you would have in a conversation with somebody. Sometimes you got to say, well, you got to do a quick aside about something that you're talking about to take the seriousness out of it for a second, so that person might laugh, and you sort of reestablish the framework for the conversation. You make a little joke, and then you can go back to the more serious thing that you're talking about. That's conversational. You can't be, 100% serious all the time and expect to have a dialogue. People say, "Geez, this guy is like so intense. I can't wait to get away from him." And I'm sure you've had conversations with people like that.
Luckily, most of the cats I talk to are just like, sometimes it's just the importance of it. Were you influenced by the rhythm sections of that, like the Scotty LaFaros and the Marty Morells and those guys? I mean, that to me was like, I'm sort of obsessed with that stuff right now.
I've transcribed a lot of Bill Evans solos, and I love his tunes, and I love the interaction of those bands, Paul Motion and Marty Morell. That's great trio records, unbelievable trio records. I only saw Bill Evans live once at the Village Vanguard. Just amazing pianist, and Scott LaFaro was already gone, I think, and it was Paul Motion. I've seen him a bunch of times since then by himself or with his own groups. Fascinating concept of drumming. Kind of a hard guy to talk to after the set, but a fascinating concept, and there's guys like Joey Barron, great drummer, who has, an interesting concept like that. Stanton Moore from New Orleans has got a great concept. Garibaldi, you mentioned before, it's a great concept of drumming and what the drums are supposed to be doing and the nuances, the delicate things that he does between the hi-hat and the snare drum and the foot. Are just fascinating. They're great.
With your trio, like, do you feel like Just before I let you go, what is your concept of leadership? I mean, and do you feel like it's part of your job as a leader, if you are a leader, to get people to draw them into that conversation, to draw them into the duet and dialogue?
Absolutely. I try to write material that's going to spotlight them. My pianist, Kyoko Oyobe, and my bassist, Amin Salim. I've listened to them a lot, and I know what I'd like to hear them play, the kind of things that I'd like to hear them play, so I write things that I think are going to spotlight those strengths in them, which is not an original idea. I got it from Duke Ellington. And
yeah.
But it's definitely my job as a leader to do those things and to encourage them and to support them. I'm older and have had more experience in terms of notes played and gigs played and traveling and stuff like that. So it's I feel like a shepherd and a mentor and paternal towards them, and mainly encouraging, do your thing, do what you do. I want to hear that, and at our best moments, that's exactly what happens. They go off into something where I just smile. I can't believe it. Oh my God, where are you going? How are you going to get back from this point? But they do. That's very exhilarating and very rewarding to hear that, in music when they feel comfortable enough with the time and the groove that they're playing over, they have the freedom to take off and do something and not worry about when they'll be able to come back to it harmonically, rhythmically. When we come back to the head of the tune, that's the time is still there and the groove is still there. And in the time that they're soloing, they're being supported and responded to, with the thing that they're playing. I try to respond to what they're playing and accent or punctuate things that they're doing rhythmically or texturally. Try to add something to what they're doing, support whatever it is they're doing. So, yeah, leader is tough. That's a tough role, especially as a drummer. And there's guys that do it really well. And it's fun. It's really fun to write stuff. This will be great for Amin. Can't wait to hear how Amin solos over this. Or I can't wait to hear how Kyoko reharmonizes this, because they're very strong personalities in their own right, and each one has a concept, and they're constantly evolving and growing. They're 30-somethings, so closer to your age.
Oh yeah, well, I'll be 40 in March, but I still feel like I'm getting younger talking to you guys. It's just such an honor to connect with you, man. And I don't know. I'm going to be in New York. I don't know. Are you in the city now, or where do you live?
Yeah, in the city, Upper West Side.
Upper West Side. So maybe we can find a time to connect in person when I come in January.
That would be great.
It would be cool, man.
That would be great.
It was really an honor to talk to you, and friend me on Facebook because I'll be transcribing the most salient stories and blasting them out all over the universe. That's what I do on my Facebook a lot.
I hope I made some sense.
You made. I mean, listen. It was a typical stream of consciousness interview, and you were. I don't think you ever were at a loss for words. I mean, we've been
okay. Good.
80 minutes here, man. So we'll do it again.
All right. Well, please call me when you're coming to town, and we'll get together.
Love you, man. Happy holidays to you and your family.
You too, Jake. Thanks for doing this with me.
Oh, always. Thank you, Chris. Later on.
Bye. All right. Take care.
Later. Bye.
Bye.
It's been a long time coming. Talking to Chris Parker, the drummer. I am going to be back on Monday with a friend of the program, Shannon McNally. Until then, have a great weekend. Peace.